Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Company decided to introduce a new electronic system into our work, but soon realized that they were losing money because of this system. The second story. Manager is not happy that we're idle and sent us to do useless work. He soon realized that without our help he cannot cope and was demoted. The third story. Local cafe was down for a day and a half because they refused to call their internet service provider, and I unplugged them from our system. Today's first story is: spend $1 billion on a system that doesn't work but still insist it gets used? Okay. So this is not my story alone, but a story of many people. So I, along with many other employees who work for a large delivery company that drives brown trucks, and used to be famous for only making right turns, had some fun with malicious compliance. I will from here on out refer to the employer as the company. For many years before I started with the company, all drivers carried a computer that had our stops listed in them. Before it was listed in the computer, you had to look at your load and figure out your piece per stops and how to run the route. Now as technology progressed, the software evolved to list the addresses and the pieces per address, which made things way easier. When the boxes are unloaded from trailers, they're scanned, and each one receives a small label. The small labels have the address, the tracking number, any commit time, the belt it's being sent to, as well as the truck number and location in the truck. Our trucks are loaded by shelf and floor location. There are 4 large shelves in the back, with 1,000 and 5,000 being on the same shelf, 2,000 and 6,000 being on the same shelf, 3,000 and 7,000 being the same shelf, and 4,000 and 8,000 being the same shelf. Now when the box comes down the line, a loader sees the truck number and load location, so they know where to load it. Now when I first started driving for the company after 16 months of loading, I felt pretty comfortable with how the truck would be set up. The computers were always in numerical order, meaning you saw the stops on your 1,000 shelf first, then the 2,000 shelf, and so on. Now, once you learned a route, you would figure out that sometimes it's best to start on a certain shelf, due to some stops having a bunch of pieces, so you could start to empty the truck. This worked very well for many years. Then the company put almost $1 billion into a complex computer program named after a star constellation that has a belt. The name is an acronym, but that's not really important. What is important is that this new system was supposed to figure out the best way for a driver to run the route in the least amount of miles. When the system was first released, it was awful, but after a few updates, the company made it known to all employees that we were to follow the route at least 90% of the time. Most of us drivers brushed it off at first because it made no sense. It would tell you that you needed to do a stop from the middle of your 8,000 shelf because it happened to be next to a commit time package that was loaded on your 1,000 shelf. Sounds simple, right? Well, that's all well and good if your load is in perfect order and your truck isn't completely full to the point that you have to climb over stuff to reach the 8,000 shelf. Well, the company kept pushing us to follow the route the computer said. So cue malicious compliance. Drivers started to follow it 100% of the time and made sure to deliver every piece the computers told us to. This meant that if you have a stop that's buried in the back, we would dig till we found the box. Now, digging in the back can take a lot of time due to many different factors, but by following the program 100%, we started to have extreme amounts of missed commit time deliveries, which means the company has to refund that to the next level shipping. It also meant that drivers were having issues getting business deliveries done before starting pickups. Then that led to missed pickups. For weeks we would follow it 100% and have service failures. When we were called into the office, a shop steward would simply say the driver was working as directed. After a while, the company realized that a computer doesn't know a route as well as a driver does. A driver knows traffic patterns and when certain places actually open. Another aspect of the compliance came with drivers who were part of a group that didn't want extra hours. If a driver was part of that group, then 3 days a week they would have to be off in under 9.5 paid hours. To ensure these hours were met, the company would send other drivers who wanted hours to take stops off those drivers. The only system would usually mean that a driver would give away 10 to 20 stops at the end of their days. With the new system, that number about doubled. Now that part didn't really bother drivers on the list because of the penalty pay that came with going over 9.5 hours more than twice a week. The company eventually backed down but wouldn't go back to the old system. So now most drivers still deliver their routes how they did for years to ensure that customers are taken care of. The company still says that new updates will help, but at this point it just seems like they are trying to cover their own A's for how much the system cost. I get the spend money to make money idea, but at a certain point you need to cut your losses and call it a day. But I guess after a certain point it doesn't matter anymore. Also, a little PS, we don't actively try to come to your house at the same time every day for a signature, but sometimes with how certain areas work, we are going to be there around the same time every day. We want you to be there to sign for it so we don't have to come back tomorrow, but sometimes we can't help it. The second story is, I love my job. My job is in the railway as an engineer for anything with a current or that moves. A lot of this equipment is safety critical and can derail a train at worst or cause delays, which to management is just as bad, but that's irrelevant. On a quarterly basis, we go around the whole railway network and check the equipment and ensure it's within safe standards. When we aren't out on site, we're on standby. My department is the center of all railway departments and a couple of other transportation departments, so we regularly get a lot of people dropping by the office with queries or requests, usually to do with what work is being carried out ATM, as we have many projects on at once that can mess with other work or show that equipment is faulty when it's just being worked on. As they can drop by, not many have our numbers except the on-call managers. So we're on a night shift during bad weather, can cause more faults on the track, and usually we will get more queries from other departments wondering if this is us or a real fault. We are chilling in the office, cups of coffee, writing reports, and of course on our phones and having a laugh when in walks the manager on call for the night, DD. DD was from another department, but still got manager on call as it's a rotation, and they cover multiple departments just for nights. To be fair, our job is normally boots on the ground maintaining equipment. It just so happened we were done and hanging around the office doing some other computer work during bad weather, so we could answer questions on inevitable calls. Bad weather is hell for a railway. He comes in and isn't happy but leaves and comes back 20 minutes later, with the same annoyed look on his face. He asks us if we have nothing productive to do in a tone that sounds like we just asked a stupid question. Very condescending. We try to explain why we're not out doing work, but he cuts us off and tells us to find somewhere to go and something to do. He doesn't want to see us sitting about in the office. So we do just that. We go out to a remote part of the track, find an equipment room, and we go in and resume our relaxation, as there's no one else there. It's only accessible by walking up the track, which you can't do unless you go through a whole ordeal. It only took 25 minutes of rest, or roughly 1 hour since we left the office for DD to call. Panicked. Apparently the other departments were getting fault calls and they weren't sure if it was our department or actual faults. Now we have plenty of contractors out on other projects, and we have software to check if it's been booked out for work or if it's actually down. It's a well-oiled machine. Take out management and it's possibly 100 different departments working in tandem to support each other and stop the others from faming, and when they do, support the passengers with other systems. We all really try, and personally the best part of the job is knowing I'm helping thousands of people every day to help see their families, get to work, go exploring, and live their best lives. We calmly explained that we were now out in equipment room doing work, and we would have to call when we're done, as you can't interrupt safety critical work. This all resulted in him getting 113 calls, according to one of DD's mates who he complained to, from other departments trying to get a hold of us. He has access to the same software as us, but obviously a different department, so he had no idea how to use it. The aftermath was that DD looked incompetent to his higher-ups, was demoted and made sure to leave us alone in the future. He did try to have the rules changed so that he had more power over us, and could interrupt us whenever, but that got shot down quickly as, again, safety critical. The last story is, fine, I don't care, just come and get all your crap. Okay, works for me. A little background. So I work for a company that sells and services POS equipment. Point of sale, i.e. those newfangled cash registers. We also usually install updated network equipment, run wiring, and set up new wireless that has separate networks for both the business and guests if need be. When we go to install this equipment and get the customer set up, we have various documents for them to fill out and sign that range from the fact that they did receive the equipment in working order to whether they wanted a guest network set up and what they wanted it to be called. One of the important areas that we have the customer initial before signing the bottom of the form is that if for any reason they decide to cancel their contract with us, we would remove all of our equipment, and they would be responsible to either have someone else there to hook it back up how they wanted it, or they could pay us an extra fee to configure everything how they needed it to work with our equipment. So on to the customer of the story. We had just demoed and sold a system to a local health food cafe, and I was tasked with getting all the equipment installed and set up, and they did us a favor, and didn't open till noon on the day we installed. So when I arrived, I discussed all the things in the document for them to sign, and told them if they would like to review it before signing, they could, and I would start unloading all the equipment, and would answer any questions they had. Like most customers, they skimmed it and then signed. So I installed the registers, credit card readers, got the internet provider to allow our router to take over, installed the wireless system, ran cables for the kitchen printers, and the whole 9 yards. Even was nice enough to run an extra cable for their manager's computer, like 15 feet away, and reset all their Nest cameras to work with the new network. A pain in the butt as they had about 10, and you had to scan each of the cameras with an app, and then change each of them to the new network. About 1.5 hours just to get that figured out. So needless to say, I did a little extra for no cost as a courtesy. Long story shorter, they had the system for about 1.5 months before one little thing wouldn't work how they wanted. We never said it would. And they got mad and said we just needed to come get their stuff, that the only time we could come get the stuff was either before 6 a.m. or after 7 p.m. when they close. We agreed, but advised them we would have to charge them an after-hours service call because those were well outside our service times. This went back and forth for about a month until they got their next payment for the equipment auto-deducted from their account, because they refused to let us come during normal business hours. At that point, the calls started to get more and more heated until the fabled line in the title happened, and they said I could come the next morning and their manager would be there. So the next morning I arrived at about 8:30 a.m. after their morning rush and found that their manager wasn't even there yet, and so I advised the employee what I was there to do and how that would affect them, and if they would like to call the manager first to confirm, I could wait. I'm not a total monster. They called and confirmed what I was there to do, so I started unplugging our stuff. Router gone. Wireless network gone. No more network means no more accessing cameras, phones. Our VoIP, so they stopped working. Their old POS they reinstalled was all on wireless. Oops, no more wireless. It took all of 5 minutes to get our stuff out and I plugged everything back in how it was before. I was lucky enough to not have any customers come in until after I left. Aftermath. They were down for a day and half on their internet because they refused to call their ISP to get it configured how it used to be because that was our job, which it didn't help that they were the type of place that didn't take cash. How gross. Then they called and said we needed to come hook their cameras back up how they were, and started threatening legal action if we didn't. I finally just took a picture of the form they filled out and highlighted the part they initialed, and just started ignoring their calls. I think they finally got the hint and stopped calling. Never heard from a lawyer and found out later that half the staff left because of the owner's attitude towards everything. And since they started using Square again, their credit card fees went back up. CYA, people. Edit. So when we install our router, if they have a router and modem combo, then we'll put into bridge mode so our router takes over. This gives us the ability to log directly into the router to address troubleshooting issues with the network as well as make sure everything is running smoothly. In most other cases, I would have moved their cameras back to their previous network and helped reactivate the previous setup as a gesture of goodwill, if it was our fault that things went bad. But I wouldn't be posting this on MC now, would I? In this case, it was purely their attitude and threats that resulted in the end result. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and have a nice day.